Hello, beautiful people of the internet. How are you doing today? My name is Jackie and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I'm going to be reacting to some of my old Goodreads reviews and ratings. This video was inspired by Ashley's Little Free Library, who made a similar video recently, so I will link her video down below. That's the one that inspired me to do this myself. I have had my Goodreads account for quite some time. I think I made it around the time I started Booktube or just shortly before I started Booktube, and I have been on Booktube since late 2018. Since then, my reading has changed so much. I was not reading nearly as many books per year before I was on Booktube. I mean, I was still reading a decent amount, especially compared to the average American, but being on Booktube has motivated and inspired me to read a lot more. I also read a lot of different books now. When I first started, I was still very into young adult literature, and now I am almost exclusively an adult reader. I don't remember the last time I read a YA book. I also, when I was younger, was much more interested in genres like contemporary or young adult fantasy. And now those are things that, again, I don't really read anymore. So I thought it would be a little interesting to sort of visit the ghosts of reading past, you could say, and see, what was I reading in 2018? How was I reviewing books? What was going on in my reading life back then? So do keep watching this video if you want to go on that journey with me. So on Goodreads, I have marked 499 books as read, so almost at 500 when I finish my current read. That is where I will be. What is this stats button? Where will that take me? Oh, okay, so I think 2018 was when I made this account, and then I marked a couple of books as read from previous years, like books that were mandatory reading in high school and things like that. And as you can see, I read 31 books in 2018, which then went up to 41 in 2019, 63 in 2020, and then the next 3 years were all in the 70s. So I think I've about leveled off. I think somewhere in the 70 to 77 range is what I can reasonably achieve. I don't want to force myself to read 100 books just for the sake of it. I do have other things in my life that are important to me besides reading, and I don't want to force myself to read faster than I'm physically capable of just to keep up with the Joneses, if you will. So as you can see, my reading really went up when I first joined Booktube, and now I think I've kind of reached what's natural for me. My goal for this year is 75, and I'm currently 1 book ahead of schedule. That's 2 fingers. 1 book ahead of schedule. So we'll see if I can do that. Maybe I'll get 76 this year. Or if I do 77, then I would be tied for a personal best. We'll see about that. Let's look at what I read in 2018. Let's look at details. Okay, so this is my ratings breakdown. All right. A lot of this was required reading for college. I would have been, I guess, a freshman or sophomore in college because I graduated high school in 2017. So I was reading Game of Thrones. I had just gotten into the Game of Thrones TV show, and so I was reading the A Song of Ice and Fire books, which I was really very into at the time, and now I'm not quite as into because Game of Thrones Season 8 was so bad. But most of these books were required reading that I had in school. Like, for instance, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I read that for a literature class in college. These books down here were all books that I read for a philosophy course. These two I didn't rate, and this one, The Lives of Animals, I really disliked. It was on veganism, and I'm personally not a vegan. No worries if you are. It's just not something that I practice, and I just felt like some of the author's pro-vegan arguments I just didn't really agree with. I think at one point he compared it to a certain genocidal event in world history, and that didn't work with me. But yeah, most of these were required reading. Like this I read for a class on Chinese history. That was also for philosophy. And Confessions by Kane Minato, I had to read for a creative writing class where my professor had us read that as an example of really great writing. This book it's actually now been discussed by several people on Booktube, though at the time I had never heard of it before. And it is told via dramatic monologues. So my professor had all of us write dramatic monologues, and she actually, as an assignment, told us that she wanted us to. So in this book, every chapter is narrated by a different character. So she challenged us, okay, if you had to add another chapter to this book from a different character, who would you choose? Write that for me. So that was interesting. I think this was also the first year that I read Frankenstein. I read that for a literature class, and I love Frankenstein. It is so, so good. One of my favorite classics. I also read To the White Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. To the Lighthouse was assigned reading in 2 different classes I took in college, and I'm sorry, I just really disliked it. It was not good. I found it very dull, and I think, that's just my personal preference. Like, I personally do not like literary fiction because I find it very boring and I think nothing happens in them. And this gives me that similar vibe where, yeah, I think objectively speaking, it's well written, but I disliked it because I was bored reading it. So what else was I reading that year? I was reading Harry Potter, which, to be honest with you, I've actually never finished reading Harry Potter because even though I own all the books already, my mom bought them decades ago. They're kind of ruined for me because of J.K. Rowling and her, let's just call it, behavior. So even though I'm not financially supporting her, like it's hard for me to feel motivated and interested in reading those books. I read And Then There Were None, which is, again, now one of my all-time favorite books. It is so, so good and started my love affair with Agatha Christie. But yeah, a lot of stuff that was just required reading in school, to be honest. If we look at 2019, I read several Shakespeare plays and all of the novels of Jane Austen because in fall 2019, I studied abroad in England. I vlogged that on this channel back in the day, and I took a class on Shakespeare and a class on Jane Austen, which I really loved. Pretty much a lot of the books that I read, I was reading on the Libby app because I was abroad, and obviously I could not take books with me. I also read a lot of Victorian literature because I took a class at my college on Victorian literature. So that's when I read things like Lady Audley's Secret, Adam Bede, Bleak House, Song of the Cid. That's an epic poem, and I read that in a class on the history of Spain. So again, a lot of required reading for school. And these were like books that I read on my app, I think. The Kind Worth Killing. Okay, I loved this. I read this on the Libby app while I was abroad, and I have a distinct memory of sitting at my desk abroad in England. And when I got to the first plot twist in this book, I was shocked. I actually spoke to my roommate, basically explaining to her what had just happened in my book because I was so surprised. I needed to talk to somebody about it. I loved this book. It does have 2 sequels now, and to be honest, I haven't read those because I'm worried that, like, it'll ruin a good thing. And also I haven't seen a lot of reviews for the sequels on BookTube, but if you read them, let me know if they were good or not. I read The Sun and Splendor by Sharon K. Penman when I was abroad. This is a book about Richard III, a historical fiction, and I really enjoyed it. It also deals a lot with his romance with his wife, Anne Neville, and I loved Richard III and Anne Neville when I watched the TV show The White Queen, so really enjoyed this book. I read a lot of good books this year, books that I remember fondly. If we look at 2020, this year, my total number of books read went up by 22. This was obviously an infamous year with the pandemic hitting, so I had a lot of time to read. Again, we're seeing a lot of required reading because I was still in college, but I also read a lot of thrillers. Was this only like my second Agatha Christie ever? Man, how far I have come. But yeah, I read a lot of thrillers, some required reading. I read Pride and Prejudice again. Did I do that for class or just for fun? I think I just reread it for fun. Though honestly, I should read Pride and Prejudice again soon because it's my all-time favorite book. There was To the Lighthouse again. It was required reading again. Oh, man. So, okay, this must be the year that I really got serious about Agatha Christie because it looks like I read a couple different books by her. All right. And this is also interesting. They have a pages over time graph, and it seems like the month where, according to Goodreads, I read the most pages was March 2021, where I read 4,006 pages. Okay, though, but that month it says that I read The Priory of the Orange Tree, and it took me many months to read the entirety of The Priory of the Orange Tree, so the graph is a little flawed because I did not read that entire thing in 1 month. It's just counting it because that's the month that I finished it. Obviously, it doesn't like spread it out over multiple months. Goodreads says that I have rated 137 books. To be honest, now in 2024, I don't write Goodreads reviews for most books that I read because I'm going to review them on my YouTube channel anyway, and sometimes like I just don't know what to type out in the written review. It also kind of annoys me how on Goodreads, if I reread a book, then the review pops up again. So like when I reread things like Pride and Prejudice or Jane Eyre, the review that I wrote the last time I read it like still popped up on my feed. So why don't we, how do I sort this? Can I do date read? Yes, let's try that. So let's try to find one from a while ago. This was from 2018. I read The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, which I do remember fondly. It says that at the time I gave it 4.5 stars. And now I think maybe I should have given it a 5 because there definitely were things about this book that I didn't like. But when I think about it now, I remember how much I enjoyed it. So I think at the time I didn't want to give it a 5 because there were things I disliked about it, but now it's resonated in a more positive way. I described it as like Downton Abbey plus murder mystery plus a time loop, all things that I like. This book so engrossed me, it made me want to neglect all my other responsibilities, which is not good when you're in college and you have assignments. Yeah, I think if you're that invested in a book, that's a really good sign. Oh man, and I like totally like summarized the plot in this. Oh man. That's also why I don't really write Goodreads reviews because I don't like having to give a long like description of the plot. I put in some parts with spoilers. Oh, and this makes me so sad because Netflix optioned The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle for a series, and now like that project is basically dead, which is so sad because I would have loved to see this as a mini series. So the premise of this book is that our main character, he is basically stuck in a time loop where he is in the 1920s, I think, at a house party, and he has to solve a murder at the party. And every day he wakes up in the body of a different guest. So I think it would have been so cool to see this as a series where different actors have to portray the same character because it's the same consciousness in their different bodies, right? I feel like that would have been so cool. And if I were an actor, I think I would love to sink my teeth into a role like that. I am so sad that they didn't end up making that series. I have to read Stuart Turton's new book, A Murder. Is it A Murder at the End of the World? No, that was that TV series. No, it has a similar title. I forget now what it's called. I need to read his new book. My review for The Wife Who Knew Too Much by Michelle Campbell. I really did not like this book. I have a rant review about it on my channel. What did I write? This book has 1, an idiotic main character who makes terrible life decisions. 2, an unlikable love interest that I hated with the fire of 1,000 suns. 3, a plot straight from a bad Lifetime movie. 4, terrible and unrealistic dialogue. 5, info dumps. 6, side characters who are also one-dimensional and unlikable. 7, a plot twist that was clearly telegraphed too early due to heavy-handed foreshadowing. 8, weird pacing. 9, side plots that went nowhere. 10, cringy sex scenes. 11, a lackluster climax. Say that 5 times fast. And 12, just awful decisions all around. Yeah, and I have to say, one of my mystery thriller pet peeves is when an author introduces a side plot that goes absolutely nowhere, and clearly the author just included it to mislead you. But if there is not actually a resolution to that side plot, it really irritates me because then clearly it was in the book for no reason other than to mislead you. And obviously you're supposed to have red herrings, but there needs to be a payoff to that red herring. If something is just dropped with no explanation, that is what really pisses me off. So that's one of the things that I absolutely hate when authors do that. Oh my God, Normal People by Sally Rooney. I read this in 2021 for an office book club that I was in at the time. And yeah, I hate this book. I know it's so beloved and considered great literature, but kind of like I said with To the Lighthouse, I think nothing happens in this book. I didn't get the point of any of it, and the characters pissed me off with their inability to communicate. Like, I think if these two talked about an emotion, it would kill them. At least that's how they act. What did I write? Oh, I put in the review specific quotes from the book that I hated. Shall we read them? It occurred to Marianne how much she wanted to see him having sex with someone. It didn't have to be her. It could be anybody. It would be beautiful just to watch him. Or this one I hate so much. When she goes out at night, men shout the most outrageously vulgar things at her on the street. So obviously they're not ashamed to desire her. Quite the contrary. Yeah, I would never have that reaction to being catcalled. And catcalling, in my opinion, is not even really about desire. It's about power and men wanting to make you uncomfortable. So yeah, there was also a subplot in this book where Marianne developed an eating disorder, but then it was kind of dropped without any resolution, and I just found that really tasteless personally. So yeah, I hate this book, and I know that's a hot take, but I stand by it. It's not a good book. I don't like Sally Rooney. Sue me, but that's my opinion. Oh, this review for Frankenstein, I started it off by saying, can you believe an unwed teenage mother cast out from society in the 19th century created the science fiction genre as we know it? Man, I love Mary Shelley. She is such an interesting person. I really loved learning about her. She's so cool, and I stand by that for sure. I also, wow, I wrote like a novel. I wrote a novel in of itself about Frankenstein. Oh yes, I remember my philosophy professor saying this, that William Godwin, Mary Shelley's father, my professor referred to him as the 19th century Bernie Sanders. I do remember my professor saying that. Honestly, a lot of these reviews are for popular or maybe polarizing books that I really disliked. I feel like maybe I was also more willing to write a Goodreads review if I felt like I had a hot take, right? Because if it's a book that everybody loves and I'm like, I love this too, well, I'm not really contributing that much to the conversation. But if I'm like, I know everybody loves this book and actually I think it's garbage and here's why, that's, more of an interesting take. And also, I feel like if you hate a book, at least it made you feel something, right? Like it inspired you to go leave, oh my gosh, a review. Whereas if you read something and it's 3 stars, like you don't really have that strong a opinion about it. Yeah, I used to be a Sarah Shepard reader. I loved the Pretty Little Liars TV series in high school, and I only ever read the first book in the series because I just found it so weird, the book. But I read several other Sarah Shepard books, and honestly, I found a lot of her books just weird. Like, really weird things will happen in her books for no reason. And so, yeah, I'm done with her now. I gave her several chances. What else? Oh, here is my review for when I DNF'd Dance with Dragons. And like I said, I was really into Game of Thrones in college, but I think the ending of the TV show being so bad turned me off because I really hated the ending of Game of Thrones season 8. So this is what I wrote when I DNF'd A Dance with Dragons. I DNF'd it at 31%. I do remember I found this book a little boring, which is interesting because I did have the points of view of characters that I do really like, but I think their storylines in this book were not their best storylines. And I mentioned in this review, when I do someday pick up A Dance with Dragons again, I think I will do a combined reading order with A Feast for Crows. I actually totally forgot that there was a combined A Feast for Crows, A Dance with Dragons reading order because these 2 books take place at the same time. You're just following some characters in A Feast for Crows and some in A Dance with Dragons. So some people recommend actually like reading them both at the same time so that you're basically, getting the complete timeline. So I actually forgot about that. Maybe then I would have liked it more. Daughter of Deep Silence by Carrie Ryan was a book that I loved before I joined Booktube. It's a young adult book, and I think the reason I loved this so much was because it really reminded me of the TV series Revenge on ABC, which was high school me's like favorite TV show. I loved that show. It's a female retelling of The Count of Monte Cristo set in modern day. And so this was a very similar book where it's about a teenage girl who takes on a false identity to get revenge for her parents and friend who were killed in the sinking of an ocean liner. And so she's trying to get back at the people who were responsible for the sinking. That's really why I loved this so much. And I read it multiple times because it just scratched the same itch for me. And I don't know, I think that is about it. So I hope that you enjoyed this little trip into my reading past. It was fun and honestly triggered some memories that I had totally forgotten about. Do let me know in the comments section, how has your reading changed over the years? Has being on BookTube helped you read more? Were there certain genres that you read a lot when you were younger, but you don't really read them now? Do let me know in the comments. If you liked this video, please do give it a big thumbs up. It really does help me, and it helps my channel grow and reach more people. My social media links are in the description if you want to follow me on Tumblr, Instagram, or be my friend on Goodreads. And please subscribe to this channel if you want to see more from me. I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. I think that is about it. Thank you so much for watching this video today, you guys, and I hope you have a spectacular rest of your day. Bye, and I'll see you next time.